Welcome back. Well, the debate on a second referendum is raging in the Labour Party, and today the People's Vote campaign have released a survey of 25,000 people suggesting Labour could fall 16 points behind the Conservatives if they allow Brexit to go through. Well, joining us now is the Labour MP Chuka Umunna. Thank you very much for being with us.
Happy New Year, Sophie.
Happy New Year. Well, I guess we're hoping for sort of new year, fresh start, try and get some movement when it comes to the gridlock that we seem to be in. Your answer to all this is a second referendum. How many MPs do you think are now in support of having another vote?
Well, I think, first of all, we've actually got to have the meaningful vote on the Prime Minister's so-called deal. I'm not going to be disingenuous and pretend that we have the numbers for a people's vote on the terms of our withdrawal from the European Union right now. But obviously what happens now and how people feel now will be very different after we've had that vote. And let's be absolutely clear. The Prime Minister gave a pledge on the 17th of December at the dispatch box in the House of Commons that we would have that meaningful vote in the week of the 14th of January. Now, if she doesn't hold that vote, she arguably will have misled the House of Commons, and there will be moves on a cross-party basis from the backbenches to ensure that the will of the House is tested on whether or not they wish to support her so-called deal. So
that's it. What would happen if the government delays the vote again, which there have been reports saying it might do?
That's right. There are various parliamentary tools that we can use to illustrate the will of the House. And frankly, if the government doesn't comply with the terms of the EU Withdrawal Act 2018, which provides for government to do a statement on the 21st of January, and then there's a determination, there's a motion brought forward as to what will happen next, then arguably the government would be in contempt of Parliament. And so they should be in no doubt that if we have further delay, which would be grossly irresponsible, we've got 82 days to go till Brexit exit day, just over 11 weeks. And one thing that people who may not necessarily be convinced of a people's vote are convinced of is that the need to avoid a no-deal Brexit. None of our constituents, I think, voted for that, and they certainly didn't vote to make themselves poorer either.
You say that none of our... I mean, I'm sure that none of your... a very small number, perhaps, of your constituents would like to see that. You are in one of the most Remain-supporting constituencies in the country.
That's right.
But in other parts of the country, polling shows that actually there is a significant number of people who would prefer a no-deal, for example, to the Prime Minister's deal.
Well, I don't think we can say categorically, one way or another, what the will of the people is actually in 2018. Well, you're right to pick me up, right to pick me up on that. But frankly, that is the whole reason why we've been arguing for the last few months for a people's vote to determine what it is now. Because 2016 was one thing, but we don't really, none of us can really say for certain what the will of the people is in 2018, not least, you know, there are over 2 million young people who can now vote, who couldn't vote before, who polls would indicate overwhelmingly do not want to see the country going down this trajectory. And I think, look, for the Labour Party, let's not forget that in 2017, a huge number of younger generations voted for the Labour Party, hoping that we would take the country on a different trajectory. And I'm not sure we will be forgiven for robbing them of their futures if we don't actually give them a say on this, the biggest...
And you think they'll blame Labour for that?
I think they'll blame... It will plague on all your houses, but given that, you know, we know that younger people overwhelmingly have been supporting the Labour Party of late, it's quite clear that they're not going to look well on a Labour Party that they see threatening their future prospects. And we've all got to bear that in mind, in my view.
One thing that I struggle to get my head around is that the People's Vote campaign is trying to push through a referendum that many people will see as divisive, many people will see as a betrayal of the first referendum, and yet you can't even agree on the details of what that would be. What do you think should be on the ballot paper? Because it seems that whenever I ask people, I get a different answer.
Well, ultimately, this is something for Parliament to determine. And let's not forget...
Look, if you're a campaign...
Well, hang on just a minute. Hang on just a minute. If you look at the People's Vote campaign, we have people from the left to the right of politics. We've got nationalists from the SNP, from Plaid. We have people who have a different view on things all together in this big tent. So from a point of view of unity of campaign, I don't think anyone can criticise us for not having an eclectic group of people. But look, I'm quite clear. Look, clearly the current deal that we have as a member of the European Union, the government's own research shows this, is the best deal that we could possibly have. So that has to be on the ballot paper. And I do think you have to have an option on that ballot paper that would please the likes of Peter Bone, that is a hard Brexit, so to speak. Those two choices, in some way, shape or form, would need to be presented to the British people. And of course, the position we're in now is very different. The argument we were having before 2 years ago was based on hypotheticals of what could happen if we voted to leave the European Union. Now we actually know what will happen. We have much more of a concrete picture, and we know that, however you voted then...
So you think 3 options then?
Well, I would say 2 or 3. I'm pretty open-minded about it, but ultimately it's for Parliament and, of course, the Electoral Commission to determine. But by the way, let's just be, let's not presume that the Prime Minister's deal isn't going to pass. Many people have been focusing...
But you think it might pass?
Who knows? Because we don't know what she's going to announce. She's going to be going on another programme in an hour's time. We don't know what she's going to say there. We don't know what she's going to be... we don't know what she's going to be saying in Parliament this week. And I don't think we can be complacent. The problem with this deal is not only the backstop, which people have a concern threatens the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom. It is that for the first time, certainly in our lives, we have a government pursuing a course which it has already told us is going to make our country poorer. That is an extraordinary thing. This deal that she's putting forward to people is going to do immeasurable damage to our economy. I mean, there's a certain irony. In the Mail on Sunday today, she is saying that if MPs don't vote for a deal, it's going to threaten jobs. She's already put out research, her own economic impact assessments, showing that her deal is going to threaten people's jobs and businesses in this country.
I want to talk to you about no deal, because it's clearly something that people on your side of the argument are very concerned about. Can Parliament actually stop no deal happening? Because surely it's the default position if you can't agree.
Well, it's a very good question. Legally, there are 2 things that would need to happen. First of all, in order to change exit day, which is stipulated in law to be the 29th of March of this year, Minister will have to put forward a regulation to change that date. Now, we're unclear as to whether that necessitates a vote of the House of Commons, but it would have to be at the initiative of a Minister. Secondly, we would have to get an extension to the Article 50 process from the European Union. And this is the key thing for me. I accept that there are some colleagues, both on the Tory and the Labour benches, across the House, who have misgivings about having a people's vote. But there is one thing the European Union have been absolutely clear about. If you want an extension to Article 50, we are not going to grant you an extension to give you more time for renegotiation, as has been mooted by some. That is not going to happen, but we will grant you an extension for a democratic vote. So the people's vote, if in the short to the medium term you want to avoid no deal, that is your route to stopping our country crashing out of the European Union in a very disastrous way. Another important point, Sophie, it has been mooted in the papers over the last few days, but if the Prime Minister fails to get her plan through the House of Commons, she will simply keep bringing it back again and again to the House of Commons. I've consulted with the clerks of the House of Commons on this. You cannot simply bring the same motion again and again and again.
So according to the clerks, she cannot bring it back?
You cannot do that. And even if, say, you sought to bring a different motion through changing one word, if it's in substance it's the same thing, under the rules of the House of Commons, you can't just be bringing it again and again and again. And what I would say to the Prime Minister is, listen to the House of Commons. She turns up every time, gives us these statements, tells us her deal is the best deal. Parliament says no, including on her own benches, and she tries to ignore it. You cannot carry on putting your head in the sand when we have the clock basically is still ticking. And she should be in no doubt, certainly in terms of what the backbenchers are saying, where so many of the initiatives for on Brexit seem to have been coming over the last few months. We will not stand for a no-deal scenario, and we're not going to allow her to simply delay this vote further. There are different parliamentary tools at our disposal, and we will use them.
Just finally, have you heard of CNP?
No.
According to Westminster Gossips in the Evening Standard, it's Chuka's new party. Is it going to happen?
Well, let's say 2 things about. Let me tell you 2 things about that. This concept arises in 2 scenarios. One, when the People's Vote campaign is going full throttle and making a success, and Brexiteer voices, frankly, in the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, peddle this nonsense. And the second thing is when the ugly face of anti-Semitism rears its head in the Labour Party too. And what this is used is a huge deflection exercise from the real issues here. First of all, the Labour Party has to deal with anti-Semitism, as I've said to you before on this show. And secondly, let's stop messing around. Let's focus on the real issue here.
So is it going to happen then?
I don't think... Well, look, I want us to stop this disaster that's happening. Everything else is deflection. Everything else is distraction. And I don't get to determine these things. As I said, in terms of any new parties or that, it's not for me to determine, as I've said to you on this show before. That's for the leadership of the Labour Party and, frankly, the Conservative Party to determine. If they want to keep their parties together, that's for them, not for me.
OK, thank you very much.